Chris. I am so glad that you could join us on the show today.
I'm super stoked to be here. Thanks for having me. Glad to get into it.
Yeah. So if you would, as everybody's kind of hopping on and listening, tell everybody about you, who you are and what you do right now.
All right. So I am Chris Austin. For those of you who don't know me, I live in Southern California. I have for a long time been known as a professional volleyball player. So first on the indoor scene, then a little bit on the sand. Right now, what I'm spending the majority of my time doing is working with humans on business, relationships, sports. So those are my three primary areas. I go around the country essentially and work with different businesses on maximizing their potential, building their teams, making them profitable. I work with athletes at schools and people who aren't athletes at schools on how to maximize their confidence and be able to essentially pursue the things that they want to pursue. And a lot of individuals and relationships, that sort of thing.
That's amazing. Now, how did you actually get into playing volleyball?
Yeah, so when I was coming up in Las Vegas, Nevada, I was born in Texas, raised in Las Vegas. I actually didn't have much success in sports. So in middle school, I got cut from my middle school team as a basketball tryout in 7th grade. I worked really hard that summer, what I thought was working hard, and was really determined to make it in 8th grade, and ended up getting cut again as an 8th grader from the basketball team. So I was really looking for something to be extracurricular, didn't want to spend a whole lot of time at home. So I started playing the drums at the end of 8th grade, heading into 9th grade. So that's what I spent the majority of my summer heading into high school doing. Kind of as a last ditch effort, I tried out for basketball one more time and finally made the freshman team in 9th grade in Las Vegas. And playing on the basketball team, I ended up having a friend named Eric Bowman who essentially convinced me to go to the volleyball intramurals. I knew nothing about volleyball at the time, didn't know the sport, and originally said that I didn't want to go, but he told me that he'd buy me lunch if I went to the tryout. So I was going to get a free lunch out of it. So I went. And in honesty, I wasn't very good to start. I did not like it. I wasn't very talented. I did not have immediate success, but he offered me lunch for a week if I was going to return. And I thought, you know, what the heck? It's 5 more days. Then I can leave this in the past. But over those 5 days, I started to get the hang of it a little bit, entered some drills that were pretty fun. And then the rest is history.
You know, my story is I didn't play soccer up until high school, but my brother signed me up to play in 9th grade. So I feel how like you were kind of going through that same thing, but you know, you experienced a lot of setbacks. Like you were cut through multiple teams.
Yeah.
And like, how did you respond to those setbacks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, when I was coming into the 8th grade, I remember pretty distinctly, like I can remember it pretty vividly in my mind, making this excuse essentially of, oh, well, it's because I'm new to the area. Like I moved from Reno, Nevada back to Las Vegas in the middle of 7th grade. So in that first tryout, I was like, oh, well, I'm new, you know, they don't really know me. So maybe that's a reason. But then that summer between 7th and 8th grade, where I spent a lot of time at the park trying to work on my game, I really thought I was going to make it in 8th grade. And I was going to a school that was 6th through 8th grade. And so when I got cut that year, I remember kind of stepping back and just thinking to myself, like, maybe basketball is not the thing for me. Maybe I should just try to find a different extracurricular. At the time, I didn't really take it as this huge blow to my confidence. It was more so the timing isn't right. But once I started to practice the drums and really spend time on that craft, that really helped me understand how meticulous detail should be when you go about things, because music is something, whether you're a singer or a person who plays instruments or somebody who produces, it takes a lot of meticulous hours to be able to master like even a singular song. So I started to look at sports that way. And I think that's a lot of the reason that I was able to kind of turn the corner once I got to high school and start making some teams and then make upward motion. Because there wasn't a lot of change in me athletically, honestly. It wasn't like I grew 4 or 5 inches. It wasn't like all of a sudden I was starting to jump, you know, a whole lot higher. It was like the way that I went about the process started to change.
Yeah. And you know, that kind of just reminds me, like we hear a lot of people nowadays talking about grit. And
Mm-hmm.
like you really showed grit in that moment, especially when you were learning the drums, to say like, okay, this is what it's like. This is
Yeah.
how to go through some of this now. And in going to that, like was Division I sports ever on your radar?
That's a really good question as well. It actually was not. Like the first time, and I remember this moment as well, the first time I ever thought to myself, I would consider pursuing this beyond today, you know, or beyond this year, was at the end of my 10th grade year. It was the first time I had made varsity. I played varsity volleyball as a 10th grader. And I was not on the court very often. I thought I should be by that point in time. Like that's where my confidence really started to flip. And I was like, okay, I'm putting in a lot of time. I'm putting in a lot of effort. I think that I should be, able to have more on-court time or more on-court success. And that wasn't necessarily the case. Ironically, the guy, Eric Bowman, who introduced me, who was the same grade as me, he was the sophomore getting the nod to start more games. And at the end of that year, I said to myself, I'm going to make a decision to like really commit my time and effort into one singular goal for me. I wasn't at the time really interested in pursuing master's degrees and that sort of thing, although later in life I did. At that point in time, I was like, I want to be an athlete and I want to be able to do this at the next level. So I started to watch like the March Madness tournament for basketball. And I was like, it would be so cool to be able to play on that stage. And I thought to myself, like, why not? So let's go for it.
That's so amazing because you could see the journey happening where like you weren't getting playing time, like you had these setbacks, and then you actually didn't end up playing Division I right away.
You're right. No, I actually went to the University of Hawaii as a recruited walk-on, and I almost forced my way in. Like the way that went down was, as my senior year approached, I didn't have any offers, and I had offers from like NAIA schools, but no Division I offers. And so I was like pressing from an email standpoint. And Hawaii was the only people really like even entertaining my emails, not even to a point of like, hey, we want you to come, just like actually emailing me back. And I said, I want to come on a visit there because I started to learn about the way official visits work versus unofficial visits. And they said, they were basically like, you can come if you want, but you're going to have to pay your own way. And I was like, okay, I'm going to save for my job. I was working at In-N-Out Burger. I'm going to save and I'm going to get a plane ticket to Hawaii. And when I get there, they said they would like take care of like 2 days worth of meals. That's essentially like all they were able to take care of on my unofficial visit. And I said, I want to come here. I want to play here. And they said, well, perhaps you could be a recruited walk-on. And I said, what's that mean? And they were like, you'll pay your own way, but you're going to be a walk-on. Like there's no scholarship kind of situation. I was like, okay, it's D1 volleyball. Let's go. Yeah. So when I got to the University of Hawaii that year, the coaching staff had actually switched from Mason Kuo was the assistant, and the longtime head coach had switched over to being Charlie Wade. And so Charlie Wade became the next coach. And so when I came in, I had to essentially retry out, like as a person who wasn't even known by the current head coach. And I ended up getting cut from that team in November. So at the beginning of November, the tryout sheet was on the board. There was a line through my name. And I remember going back to my dorm and thinking to myself, if this was it, for my volleyball career, if like I should just pursue being a dentist at this point, or if I should go on to try something different. And I literally sat in my dorm for 2 days. Like I did not come out of my dorm for 2 days. And it wasn't like a depression. It wasn't like this sadness. It was like, I want to feel out this decision. I want to make sure that I'm making the right decision because this is going to change my life. And so I decided I was going to transfer to Long Beach City College because at the time you couldn't transfer from a 4-year to a 4-year without sitting out a year. Yeah. And I didn't want to sit out a year. So I transferred to Long Beach City College. And I remember my mom telling me, like, Chris, if you leave a 4-year university and go to a junior college, like, I'm not going to support that financially. And so another challenging decision, but I made it. And so immediately I got to Long Beach. I got myself an apartment that was a couple $100s a month. Ended up trying out at 3 clubs to become a club coach, coached high school at Long Beach Poly, refereed on the weekends, ate top ramen and Eggo waffles for like 6 months, and just like felt the California volleyball lifestyle, started getting ingratiated, learned about Sam volleyball, and ended up playing at Long Beach City for about 1.5 years. So that's really where my skills started to improve from the coaching by Randy Tutorp, as well as like time spent on my own. But that point is where I really was like, okay, I'm going to get back to Division I volleyball. I'm not going to let somebody stand in the way of that happening.
Yeah. And what was that like? And those moments of you're like, I'm pouring everything into this and I've got to figure out what this next step is, because I too played at a junior college, and, sometimes you've got to feel it out about what's that next step. Now I made the decision not to continue on playing after a major injury, but you had that opportunity to go to Division I and play.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, that story was pretty ironic. Like I've got some stories for people, but ultimately, like going through that process, to answer your question, it was challenging. Like to think to myself, I'm literally coaching 3 different groups in the same day. I'm starting the process of teaching private lessons. I'm refereeing on the weekends, which is about 12 hours of standing straight and not really moving around, not exercising, just literal standing for 12 hours. And then also trying to compete as an athlete. So at this point in time, there was no like thoughts about recovery or normateching or anything like that. It was literally like pedal to the metal from 6 a.m. when I was going to Belmont Shore to start trying sand volleyball to my 8:30 a.m. lifts at Long Beach City, go to class all day, get out of class, practice from 1 to 3, leave at 3, go have a practice from 4 to 6, arrive to 1 late, 6 to 8, and then have a final one 8 to 10, go home, sprinkle in some homework for half an hour, try to go to sleep by midnight, wake up at 5:30 and do it all over again. Like that was the process for a good year and a half of my life and then even beyond. But that grind is important, I think, for a lot of people who consider themselves an underdog. If you go into a situation and you understand you're not at the top of the food chain, which doesn't necessarily mean you're at the bottom, but if you're not at the top of the food chain and you have a desire to be, you're going to have to do more than the people around you. And that's what I see most with the athletes who I work with now, whether adults or kids. I see mostly that overarchingly there tends to be a little bit of a, hey, show me what I'm going to get out of working hard first, rather than let's put in the work. And it's going to be a little bit of a mystery of where it ends up, but the process is going to be fun. So being able to find fun in the grind is important.
Oh, it's so important. And I think what culminates out of this whole story is like you literally went from being the player less likely to come off the bench to being a starter setter for a national championship team.
Yeah.
At the Division I level.
Yeah. And I had some fortune go for me that way. Like ultimately, you hear a lot of people say this, like luck is preparation meeting opportunity. But for me, like when I got to Irvine, the whole reason I got to Irvine was just fortune. And I was pressing them. And originally they said, Chris, you're not going to play volleyball here. If you want to explore being a student only and not an athlete, we may be able to help with the admissions process, but you're not going to play volleyball here. And I pressed and I said, like, I'm going to play volleyball at UC Irvine. And so what happened was a month later, I get an email that says, hey, Chris, our circumstances have changed and we'd like to offer you an official visit to UC Irvine. And at the time I thought it was my boldness, that created that. But also, there was a kid who was on the team who broke their drug contract and ended up doing, something illegal. And so a spot opened up and it was the 11th hour and I could slide into it. And so once I arrived, I was literally the last person on the team in terms of experience, size, comfort, any of those areas. And I'd like to say that it was just only like hard work over time made it happen, but that's not the case. Like is persistence. Like I was working hard and I got an opportunity early on and I kiboshed it. Like I remember getting on the court in preseason in this match where we were playing a Korean team from overseas in our beginning of the year tournament. And I ended up setting like 4 balls in a row that were all unhittable and got taken back off the court. And so the next time I ended up seeing the court outside of being a serving sub was when a setter on our team ended up getting a concussion in practice. But in the meantime, like between that first experience where I did not have good results on the court to when that setter got a concussion, all that in between time was spent like thinking about that moment that I wasted. And I said, like, if I ever get another opportunity, like I won't be scared. I won't be nervous. I'm not gonna hesitate. I'm just going to be aggressive. And so that really changed the mold for me,
Yeah. And, and I hear you as you're talking about this, I hear the development of that confidence as you're coming through and you're thinking of like, what's that next move? How can I really make things happen? I think a lot of times student athletes, like something bad goes their way or they get taken off the court or the field and they don't put in that extra work.
Yeah, no, I think that so much in today's current society, and I never want to put everybody in the same box. It's definitely situational, but in today's society, a lot of times you do find there's an excuse for why somebody's not having things go their way. It was the coach, it was their teammate, it was the timing, it was the late notice, it was something else other than them being able to look at themselves and say, I'm going to take responsibility for this situation, how this goes. So the people who I see achieve at the highest level in any craft, whether that be sports, business, relationships, the common denominator is that they take responsibility for what happens. Like, and that's such a big deal. For me, I wasn't a person who always took responsibility in my younger years. And until the last 10 years of my life, I would even say I didn't always take responsibility. But when you get to a point where you do understand the importance of taking responsibility, it's super empowering. Like, it is super empowering to you being able to get to a new level, beyond where you are now, and then be able to influence others.
Yeah. And it's so huge because, as you're doing that, your confidence is growing. And I think a lot of times now we see players don't have that confidence to go out there. So, kind of a two-part question here is, how do players actually go about developing their confidence, whether on their court, the field, the mat, in the gym?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, most of my job now is helping people master confidence. I have a book on it that's called Become Your Best, Mastering Confidence Through 6 Phases of Quotes and Notes. And it was created because I continue to run into people in the athletic spectrum, and then the business spectrum, and then the relationship spectrum, where they knew inherently that there was some kind of talent there, or there was some kind of drive, or there was some kind of desire to be good, but there was a big piece holding them back. They would spend hours and hours training, or hours and hours in the office, or hours and hours like working on their relationship, and they wouldn't be able to find success. And the common denominator, again, to the people who end up at the top of the food chain is they have confidence. They
Yeah.
believe that they belong. They believe that they're good. And so in order to foster that and be able to create that, it is like anything else. It requires a process. It requires a foundation. It requires a foundation you can return to. It requires a very specific approach for each individual. People have different insecurities about different things, but ultimately, to be able to master confidence, like, it begins with awareness. That's the first phase of my 6 phase process when I work with people. And, we obviously divulge deeper into it with my live clients, but being able to have confidence is something that is within each person's control. And that is like the biggest thing for people to understand. There's a lot of people out there who believe confidence is something you have to be born with, or they will label themselves or label another person as if it has to stay well, they're just not that confident, or they're not naturally confident, or they don't have what you have, or they don't have what this person has. But each one of us has the ability to master confidence. It just starts with having the desire.
Yeah, I think that's so pivotal, especially for these students who are listening and parents. If you're listening about how to help your student take this kind of to the next level, when you're really looking at these dreams of playing college sports, whether it's Division 1, 2, 3, or even, NAIA or junior college, like there's always an opportunity that's out there to really develop this confidence.
Yeah, confidence is totally worth investing in. That's the biggest thing that I tell people who are hesitant about A, understanding its importance, or B, knowing its importance, but not really having a solution of how to create it. It's worth investing in. The same way having a private trainer is worth investing in, the same way having extra repetitions, the same way having a club team. Like, investing in your confidence, in my opinion, is more important than those things, because what separates people who are close is confidence. Ultimately, it's not this person jumps 40, this person jumps 38, this person runs 4.5, this person runs 4.6. The thing that separates people is what happens between their ears. So it's definitely worth investing in.
Yeah. And and nowadays it's not just about being the star athlete as you're going through all these recruiting processes. I mean, it's truly coaches are looking at all of these different avenues, including nutrition, mindset, academics. And, confidence plays a big role in the coaches and their conversations they have with students as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And for having been on that side, being a person who's coached at the high school level, the youth level, the club level, the college level, and the Division 1 college level, every different level, the conversations are symmetrical. It's not all about, how talented a person is, although in honesty, talent matters. So for anybody out there who believes like talent doesn't matter, talent totally matters. And talent, unfortunately, does separate some people. But when the battle's close, like whenever the battle's close, the things that separate have nothing to do with talent or even experience or any of those cliche things. It has everything to do with response, like the way you respond to stressful situations, the way you respond when things don't go your way, the way you respond when things do go your way. All those sort of things like really come into play.
Yeah, and that's so good for parents to hear because I think a lot of times they get stuck in the actual process of like recruiting and talking to these coaches and seeing all these things, and they want to know how they can help their student take it to the next level. And I think you laid it out perfectly, from your experience, not only as a player but also as a coach.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool space to be in, to start to get to step back and watch like a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures and a lot of different ages and stages go through their process and be able to develop like a legitimate process that can help people. So that's a cool space for me to be in at this point, is like I've passed over from being just the athlete who's going through it and then to being somebody who has to watch it, like in my early coaching days, but I'm right there in the process with them. Now, most often, I'm actually kind of a step back, getting to watch it almost like movie theater style, right, and seeing like what works, what doesn't work, what are the common denominators in success, what habits push people towards the success that they desire, what habits take away, and being able to develop a process where people can follow, have like a building guideline. That's been like the biggest change in my personal life. So I'm super happy to be able to help individuals, expand there.
Yeah. And so say that there's a parent, some students who want to get in touch with you because they're super interested in hearing about this. Where do they go about to like finding you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So on all social media platforms, if they search Chris P. Austin, my name, my middle initial, last name, Chris P. Austin, they can find me there. I do answer DMs, so hit me up in the direct message. That's how you and I got connected.
Yep.
And then Chris at chrispaustin.com. I've got a whole team, who works on all this stuff with me, but I'd love to get in direct contact with anybody who wants to become their best. That's what I do this for.
And then where can they find your book if they wanted just to start with something small there to start kind of learning those phases?
Yeah. So if you go to chrispaustin.com/books, you can get a copy of my first book, which is The Way, A Hawaiian Story of Growth, Relationships, and Volleyball. That story is about the most successful youth club team in history and how they were able to essentially maximize and keep consistency within their success. And then my second book, Become Your Best, Mastering Confidence. That is what should be on everybody's nightstand, I think. And you can go to chrispaustin.com/books. It's also available on Amazon.
Oh, that's awesome. And, I always ask our guests, because the podcast is actually called Confessions from the Sidelines. Mm-hmm. What is your favorite memory of standing on the sidelines?
Gosh, that's a really good question. My favorite memory of standing on the sidelines is being in a professional match in Argentina and watching this guy named Joran Jovanovic. He was our right side player on our team, and we were playing what's called like a Sev Cup match, which is it's like the European Championships. Mm-hmm. And so this guy is the guy who comes to practice every day early and hits serves, and stays late every day and hits serves. And I would just watch his process, and he'd make like a lot of errors. He's a high reward, high risk person, but he'd make a lot of errors. And we were down in this match one time. The score was 9-14 in a fifth set, playing to 15. And our team sides out to get 10. He goes back to the service line. And I remember like it was yesterday in my head, like the crowd was like super alive, like super into it. And for their team, like we were in Argentina playing this team for their team, and they like thought they had it in the bag. And this guy goes back and reels off 6 straight aces to win the match. 6 straight aces, not like, okay, ace, and then, there's a rally and we get a stuff, but like aces, like bang, 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 like shoot them down movie style. And I remember like looking at that, and that was such like the live, real life visual of that's what preparation does. Yeah. Preparation gives you the opportunity to be able to have success. So watching that live, I was like, man, to be able to pull that off like was a big deal. And this was not like small time, like middle school. It's like professional European Championship volleyball. Like it was pretty impressive.
That's an amazing story. And I think you just said that you remember it so vividly, and there's so many things that we remember standing on the sidelines. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
No doubt. It's been such an awesome conversation.
Yeah. And thank you so much for being here with us today. And we'll make sure to include all of those links about Chris's book and his social media handles and his website so that you guys can get in contact with him.
Perfect. Appreciate you, everybody watching this. Really appreciate you guys watching, and check out more of her episodes.
Yeah. Thanks so much. See ya.